My name is Shobhaa and I'll be in conversation with Nadya. I'd like to start this afternoon session by paying a heartfelt tribute to Asma Jahangir, someone I valued greatly in my own life, someone I had met and have enormous respect for. I would like to just say we were lucky to have known someone like her, and a light has certainly gone out. Nadya and I, we go back to her very first book, which I had the privilege of launching in Karachi many years ago. After that, I followed her life closely, and we became family friends, Abbas. When she moved to Singapore, I followed what she was doing in Singapore. And to my great surprise and delight, she had acquired a new discipline and a new passion and had trained as a psychotherapist. This book, when I saw it, she sent me the copies of it just before it went into publication, and I read it in over 2 nights. I found it very fascinating for many reasons. Apart from the visual imagery, which Nadya is particularly good at, and I see it perhaps becoming a film very soon, it is also the exploration of identity as a woman. It's an exploration of being displaced. It's an exploration of leaving Pakistan and relocating to Singapore and then coming back to Pakistan. The book is, in a way, follows the same trajectory. But it's very intriguing because it starts with a jade mirror which belonged to her mother, which she steals. And at the end of the book, her husband calls her a bit of a thief. He said, "You always liked picking things." And she corrects him and she says, "I didn't exactly steal the silver bird and I didn't steal the mirror." There are lots of metaphors in that mirror, which I'll leave Nadya to share with you, because she'll do it far better than I can.
Well, Shobhaa, Invisible Ties, like I was telling you, is... Achha, okay. Invisible Ties, as I was telling you, is the story of a woman who goes across borders, I think, to find love. And that is the most important thing. Like you talked about identity, it is, as a woman, wanting to find herself, learning to accept her limitations, and most important, to love yourself. So I think this is a Pakistani girl's journey, Noor Kamal. And in a way, like you said, it's not my story, because everybody keeps on asking me, like they did in Kolachi Dreams, is this your story? It's not my story, but I do feel empowered to tell this story because as a psychotherapist, I have experienced a lot of issues that I talk about in this book. So like you mentioned, one is about really strongly believing in your identity as a woman. Secondly, about arranged marriages. This girl is actually, I would say, most not forced, but coerced into marriage.
Would you call it a trick that her cunning mother plays on her for her own selfish needs? Is she tricked into an arranged marriage?
I would say in a way, yes, because when this proposal comes for her, and she's a girl from a privileged class. And so one of the points that I wanted to make is that women, across board, whether they are privileged, whether they're not privileged, they have the same issues. And in South Asia more so, like India and Pakistan, and they do. The arranged marriage is a real issue. So she's actually, like you said, coerced, tricked or coerced, whatever you used. There's a robbery which happens in her house. It's a daylight robbery. And the mother uses that because the mother gets kidnapped, and she uses that to sort of, use that as to manipulate the girl into marriage. The girl wants somebody that she loves because, like as you mentioned, she has this jade mirror She's an insecure person. And for her, the mirror is like her secure base. So I think these are the things that she's looking at when she wants somebody who would accept her. So that's what she's looking at, but that doesn't really happen. And she gets married to this really high-flying Pakistani banker based in Singapore. And so then the story begins, and the marriage is not what it seems like. And so that's how it is.
How does Noor discover the meaning of love and marriage in the book? Because in the end, there is a sort of reconciliation. The husband from whom she is alienated, there's an American friend. I thought he was more than a friend, but you clarified that he remains a friend in the end, just a buddy. At any rate, there's a close relationship with an American called Jake.
Yes.
And there are interludes at various points where, to me, it seemed like he's either a catalyst who makes her aware of her own potential.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
in a way also persuades her without knowing it to confront herself and maybe go back to a life which she didn't initially want to be a part of.
I think you're right in that. I think this was it. This is her process of growth and self-discovery. And when you leave your country, you're actually leaving your comfort zone. So you're actually opening yourself to new experiences. And the American is experience. It also is a way of reflecting on blurred boundaries between a man and woman relationship. So while he's not a boyfriend, but because he's a man, we assume that he's going to be her, there's going to be more to it. So this is one of the things that I wanted to talk in my book, that, that it is possible to be friendly with a man without not being lovers or not being strictly your boyfriend. What's stopping you? There doesn't have to be a sexual element in just being friendly with a man. You can have more in common with him.
But when you were studying to be a psychotherapist yourself,
yes,
what was that process like? Because a lot of it has trickled, obviously it would, into the book, because Noor happens to be a psychotherapist as well.
Yes.
So what was your big learning from psychotherapy? What did you discover about yourself that you didn't know earlier?
When I ventured into psychotherapy, it was always like, going into the helping profession. And when people would ask me, why did you take this up? I would say, to help myself, to help other people. And I didn't realize that actually psychotherapy is more about helping yourself, getting to know yourself, having more self-acceptance for yourself, and loving yourself. It's always like, before you can help other people, it's more important to help yourself, to understand yourself. How do you expect to understand other people if you're not going to understand what you're all about? So I think psychotherapy is an enabler for change, because life is dynamic. People are changing all the time, and so are you. And you don't have any control on other people. It's only you yourself that you have more control over.
You've also used other metaphors like architecture and shared legacies and monuments and buildings, whether you've done a comparison between buildings in India and in Pakistan and the buildings, the heritage buildings in Singapore. Yes. So there is a thread of architecture which you have tried to connect cultures.
Yes.
So do you want to discuss that a little more?
Absolutely. I'm feeling so happy to be here in Lahore because, because there's a whole chapter which I have based in Lahore, in the Sheesh Mahal. Yeah. So the Mughal theme is very much there. I just want to mention that Noor, the protagonist, when I was writing the book, The Jade Mirror, right, it has a dragon. Yeah. So I was using the foreshadowing because Noor is the dragon. I was studying Feng Shui, and the dragon is the yang symbol. And so, there's this shelf in the mother-in-law's home when Noor goes to Singapore for the first time. And so a lot of people have asked me, why the animals? Why do you place so much? But you see, this is Feng Shui. So the white tiger is the husband, the dragon is Noor. But she doesn't know that she's the dragon, so this is the whole process. Similarly, Noor is the Koh-i-Noor.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another metaphor. So Kohinoor, because it is so beautiful, it is so precious for us, and it is our shared legacy. And it's displaced. It's had that history of displacement
Yeah.
and being a bit of a curse.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
But we do feel, even if it's in London, it sort of belongs to us. Yes, it does.
Which it rightfully does.
Yes.
And should definitely come back.
It should, it should. And so this is why the story ends in Tower of London. And when I'm mentioning about the Sheesh Mahal and how happy I am to be in Lahore, to sort of, be here. And I was just thinking, I'm going to go to the Sheesh Mahal now because there's a whole chapter in Lahore. And I'm so glad that I'm here. And so the Kohinoor, it ends in Tower of London where Kohinoor is. And she's with Jake and the husband. And so it's all planned. The locations are all planned. Very, very,
So when you started to structure the book, did you sit down, and a lot of writers do that, is they create a graph of the story and the characters and then pretty much adhere to that? Or did you go into the book organically and the characters started to speak for themselves once you'd got them clear in your head?
Shobhaa, I have lived with this book for 4 years, and I think for those 4 years, I think everybody suffered. Abbas has suffered, my daughter has suffered, and I literally was obsessed. Okay, the story comes to me as a whole. It's like it comes to me as a whole. So I see the whole story. I know the story. So I'm blessed. I really think I'm blessed in that way. The characters come to me as like I know what I'm doing. So I actually sit down, I write a synopsis. That's how structured I am. And then after that, I'm open to everything. So whatever comes, it's the energy of the book. Wherever I go, so I live with these characters. I feel these characters. And of course, the story would evolve with my own writing, with my own experience of putting pen to paper. So it's quite interesting and it's quite intense.
There's also a girlfriend in the book who
Yes.
plays a very prominent and a very strong role. Do you want to talk about the relationship between Noor and the girlfriend and what happens and what doesn't happen, what goes wrong?
Okay. So what happens is that when Noor goes to Singapore and she's, sort of coerced into this arranged marriage, she finds out that things are not really what she was expecting. And so there is that sort of indifference element into the marriage. There is that tumultuous time in the marriage where she doesn't know what's going to happen with this man, Mikal Kaleem. And there's this interesting mother-in-law also, which we'll come into later. And so she decides that to help herself, because she's in this marriage, she can't go back home because there's this robbery which has taken place in the home, and the mother is in a post-trauma situation. The father is looking after the mother, and she doesn't want to face the social stigma of a failed marriage. So she sort of decides to take up psychotherapy and sort of help herself and try to make the most of the situation. And she comes across this female friend, Ella, who is Chinese. And like I mentioned, Invisible Ties, the title means that we are all connected to each other in intangible ways. And those intangible ways, to me, that is humanity. So when you're opening yourself, like she opens herself to Ella, Singapore, there's a real problem, Shobhaa, and it's to do with the fact that I think it's one of the places which has a negative birth rate. Mm-hmm. People don't want to have children, and that is the truth. And Ella is is a woman in her 40s, while Noor is in her 20s. So they strike this connection, which happens, and because when you start talking, and and she finds out that Ella is very stressed out because she's in her 40s, she doesn't want a child, but her husband wants to adopt a child, and so sort of Noor is perplexed. I mean, why wouldn't you want a child? Because here she's coming from South Asia, from Pakistan, where people just want to have kids. And so this is a standard thing. So she's learning about Ella, and Ella is trying to help Noor, again, like Jake, to tell herself that there's more to you than just this marriage. Wake up. Look at me. I don't want to have a child, so I'm asserting myself. We are negotiating whether we should adopt a child, me and my husband, or not. So this is all the different kinds of way in which Noor is actually empowering herself.
There's also, the book starts with a driver and peacock feathers.
Yes.
And the peacock feathers keep coming up in different forms in the book. And at some point, the peacock feathers are bloodied.
Absolutely.
And there are many, many images associated with peacock feathers, violence as well, mainly violence, I would
Yes.
think. So that incident with the driver, which takes place in Karachi,
Absolutely.
maybe you need to talk about that. We'll give a perspective on the book.
Okay, so the incident in Karachi which happens is a daylight robbery. Just got to mention about the driver, that the driver is very important in Noor's life because the mother is a socialite, the father is an educated man, but he doesn't have the time because he's working. And the driver is kind of her secure base because the mates keep changing. The mirror stays the same, so it's the secure base also. But the driver has been the only consistent person in Noor's life who may be, in a little way, classified as a caregiver. Now, what happens is that when this daylight robbery happens in Noor's house when she's in her 20s, the driver, the guard plans the robbery, and there's mayhem, there's confusion, and they're in the car, and I mean, Noor sort of registers that this is what is happening, that it's actually the people who are protecting me are the people who are actually doing this. So that's a big trauma. Where is safety? Where am I?
It's betrayal,
Yes.
betrayal from those you expect to be your guardians.
Guardians.
Yeah.
So that's that. So the driver springs and sort of saves Noor's life.
Yeah.
So and the driver comes from obviously the underprivileged class. The driver has about 9 kids. He has a family to support. And here is Noor, the only child of her parents, living this golden life. And she feels that for him because he's the only person who's really been there for her. So she's living that post-trauma, that guilt, that here's this poor man. So that's where the peacock feathers come in because she's wearing and I've talked a lot about clothes, and so there's this, so all the kind of little symbols that you see. So exactly like you said, the peacock feathers come as haunting images. Something which Noor cannot understand also. Because she's not in a place to. This is a growth when she goes and she gets into psychotherapy, then she tries to make sense of these images. What are these images, these haunting images?
Was there also an exploration of class when you talk about the Noor's relationship with the driver, which is one of dependency, emotional dependency, but at the same time there is a class divide which doesn't go beyond a certain point of acceptance?
I think there is, and I think what I've tried to do is, again, empathy, which I think goes beyond classes, and I mean, there will be always the haves and the have-nots, but again, there has to be empathy, and you can actually feel those things. And same to do with when I'm just sort of contrasting elements like Pakistan, Singapore. Pakistan, one of the most, let's say, chaotic places, Karachi. And then Singapore, one of the most organized, cleanest, safest places. And I wanted to show this element of safety. What is safe? I mean, the parents marry her off saying that you're going to be safer in Singapore. But there she is, haunted by the images. Is Singapore really safe for her? So, I mean, these are the things that I'm playing with.
Then there's a Malaysia interlude.
Yes.
So what did Malaysia represent to you in terms of, as a literary device? Why Malaysia?
Okay, Malaysia represents a lot as a literary device because Malacca has this beautiful street, Shobhaa, where I went, and it's called the Harmony Street. So when she goes into the street, which has this most beautiful mosque, which is the oldest mosque, I think it is the oldest mosque, and it's a Kampong Kling mosque. And then it has an Indian temple, which is like just adored, just right next to it. And then there's this beautiful Chinese temple, right? And then there's a Buddhist also monastery. So it's one of the most beautiful. You see this eclectic mix of cultures. And when I looked at that mosque, I saw this beautiful, because it has fusion of elements. It has Chinese, the pagodas, it has the Victorian fountain, it has the Indonesian Balinese ceilings. And I was like just enthralled. I said, God, I mean, this is such a beautiful, and then there's this, this symbol of double happiness written on the mosque in Chinese, engraved as you enter. I said, this is such a peaceful place. So I was just imagining when Joseph dies, where would he go? You see? So this is when Noor goes to Malacca. So the Malacca chapter starts in the church because he's a Christian. Now, I don't tell you whether Joseph is alive, whether he's not alive, whether this is Noor's imagination or whatever, but she can feel the presence of Joseph. And from the church...
Did you say who's Joseph?
Joseph is a driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joseph is a driver. And then she gets into the taxi to sort of search for him. And the taxi is driven by the guard who killed Joseph.
Yeah.
And so then the dialogue starts, and then he takes her to Harmony Street, where I'm saying. So in that sense, when they're searching for that ghost of Joseph, where does Joseph go?
Where does Joseph go?
But it ends in the mosque where she's praying, and she says, that forgiveness is sublime, and this is a part of our religion. Allah is divine, and we are taught forgiveness. And so you have to read more to find out.
So Joseph may or may not have existed at all.
Yes. Yes.
So a lot of it is connected through surrealistic images and what you leave to your reader to figure out. And
I think I worked on it very consciously. And when I was writing, I said I want to do a literary novel this time after, Kolachi Dreams, which was out and out commercial. But when I was doing it, I said I want a literary novel which actually could appeal to everyone. So there was this, kind of dilemma going on in my mind, So I actually structured this novel in such a way, and I'm quite happy that, even a 15-year-old girl was reading it. So it's layered in such a way that you can just interpret it according to your level of whatever intellectual and emotional capacity.
I think we have 5 minutes to take questions. So I'm sure Nadya will be very happy to take your questions. There's one right there in front. The young man in front there.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarmad Iqbal and I'm a blogger. My question is for Ma'am Shobhaa. Namaskar, ma'am. Before asking my question, I would like to greet you in your native Marathi. Tumi kasha ahat?
मी अगदी चांगली आहे. Are you all right? तुम्ही कसे आहात?
I'm very fond of Marathi language. I'm kind of learning it these days. And
Well, your accent is very good. You're doing great.
thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Like, you have always been an epitome of courage and conviction for me. Be it the Speed Post or the Starry Nights, you have always enthralled me. I think I'm your biggest fan in Pakistan, like the way you have written
Thank
your
you. That's
novels
very
and your
kind. Thank you.
articles.
Thank you very much.
I, as an aspiring young Pakistani writer and actor, want to ask you that, is it ever possible, like for me and for so many other people like me in Pakistan, to ever gain someday ginormous popularity in India through whatever art or craft we pursue? In the same way, Indian artists have always gained ginormous popularity in Pakistan, despite all political tensions and all the political tumult which goes on.
Well, I would say that Fawad Khan remains an iconic hero, and all of India has been in love with him ever since he made his debut in the movies. And it's really a pity, a great big pity, that politics has kept our artists separate.
Abhari aahe.
Any more questions?
Thank you all very much. Oh, there's one at the back. We can take that one for Nadya.
Maybe he wants it for you.
No, that's why I'm directing it at you.
No.
Hello, madam. I am psychologist. My name is Faisal Mahmood, and my question to Madam Nadya: being a psychotherapist, when you see the conflict between some couples over between in humanity and human nature, how you do you agree with the psychodynamic perspective? Do you write these are story with the psychodynamic perspective, or were you using some another perspective of the psychology?
It's a
Please.
very interesting question. I wanted to actually touch on this on my discussion. I have actually trained in the psychodynamic perspective. I've done my master's, and the theory that I used is attachment theory, which is post-Freudian and more to do with John Bowlby. So the early years of your life are actually where you get to have a secure base. So you need a very consistent caregiver. So that's the perspective that I've used for structuring my character Noor Kamal, because her early childhood is not, she doesn't have the secure base. And that's why later on also that's a template all for her relationships. She feels that insecurity. So the early years are the most important years in our life.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks
Thank you
very much.
so
Thank
much.
you, Nadya.
Thank
All
you
the
so
best.
much, Shobhaa.